Now to the election, which is now, as we've said, just 9 days away. And here we have those brand new poll numbers we've been telling you about, brand new polling information. These are new numbers, hot off the presses. They are coming into us just seconds ago. New NBC News Marist poll numbers from 6 of the key battleground states. This is brand new data on where those races stand. And the panel is back with me here to go through that. We have Kellyanne Conway, Evan McMorris-Santoro, and Basil Smikle to join us. So let's start. We have six states here, a bunch of numbers from each of them, and let's go through them. We'll start in Kansas. We were just talking about Kansas, and there's the latest number. NBC Marist poll this morning. It shows Greg Orman, the independent, 1 point ahead of Pat Roberts. The last time NBC and Marist surveyed this race, it was a 10-point lead for Pat Roberts. For Greg Orman. So Roberts closing the gap there. Also, a poll in the governor's race out there. Again, we were just talking about this, and you can see exactly what we just showed you. Paul Davis barely ahead of Sam Brown back in Kansas. We move on to Iowa. Key race there between Joni Ernst and Bruce Braley. Joni Ernst running 3 points ahead of Bruce Braley, about where this race has been the last time we surveyed it for NBC and Marist. It was 2. Looking at Colorado, this is a state we were also talking about earlier, question of how accurate the poll. This is one of the better polls that the Democrats have gotten in Colorado in a while, frankly. That's a 1-point gap there, Udall against Gardner. Udall, the embattled incumbent. There have been polls showing him down 5, 6, 7 points, a little closer. Also, there's a governor's race in Colorado. We can put that up for you. New number there. John Hickenlooper, the Democratic incumbent, doing a little better than Udall. He's ahead by 5 points over his challenger. We should also note the gender gap in Colorado. This has been a big story out there. Right now, it has Udall in that Senate race winning women by 11, Gardner winning men by 15. Democrats have been banking on getting a big number among women out there. Arkansas, next state we have for you, big Senate race there. We have Tom Cotton running 2 points ahead of Mark Pryor, the incumbent. Again, that's one of the better polls that Mark Pryor has seen lately. He's been falling further and further behind, 2 points behind in the NBC poll here. Next one, North Carolina. Dead even. Look at that. Kay Hagan, Tom Tillis, that's a libertarian gobbling up 7%. This is one of those states where Democrats have been leading. Hagan's been leading, and it's sort of a sign on election night. If this were to go to Tillis on election night, and you want to say, is there a Republican wave forming? Well, if they're winning North Carolina, there probably is. And the last one we want to show you, this one, I think it's time now we can say, back to the red column. There was some suspense here in South Dakota. There was a poll a week or two ago that said, wow, a crazy three-way race. Well, gravity has asserted itself in South Dakota. Mike Rounds, the Republican, now comfortably ahead, Rick Weiland at 29, and Larry Pressler falling back to 16. We'll keep an eye on it, but until further notice, when I'm doing that big board, that map over there, South Dakota's going to be red. So, new numbers, guys. Have at it. What do you think of these? Well,
it was a nice fake out by Democrats on the South Dakota thing.
Fun while lasting, huh?
I'll leave the poll analysis to Kellyanne, who knows a lot more about this than me. But I will say something interesting about this is that we saw last week this whole idea that Democrats are already sort of setting up this blame game for a bad night on election night. Looking at these races, Democrats have been saying right along that in a close election, their turnout machine is supposed to win. So we're going to see now, we're put that to the test, it looks like, in almost every single one of these very, very tight races. And the other thing I thought that stands out to me from what you're showing is this idea that Democrats have been talking about with this women gap. And there was some talk that Cory Gardner, the Republican in Colorado, was able to sort of close that and had the goods to end that for Republicans. That does not seem to be accurate either.
They're getting closer. In this poll, Democrats are getting much closer to what they want to be getting there in terms of a gender gap.
And, you know, going back to something you said, there's just been this incredible back and forth. They take money out of Kentucky, they put money back into Kentucky. They take money, they're taking money out of a race in Virginia, so there's a House race in Virginia. So it looks like in many respects the Democrats, for a period of time, were on the offense, and now in some respects they're playing defense just to keep some of the seats that they hold near and dear to them. But I think one thing that's also striking is that the Hagan race is still close, considering all the money that they've been putting in there. The Clintons were there. Hillary was just there the other day talking about women's equality, pay equality. So I think there's a lot of investment, not just by the Clintons, but Democrats broadly in some of these southern states, and the Appalachian states in particular. But we're starting to see a lot of our earlier good chances of winning in some of those states now receding. And so I'm curious to see what happens.
Kellyanne, I've heard on North Carolina, I've heard the comment made that Hagan has run the better campaign than Tillis. It's why she's been leading all the way, and that if she ends up losing this thing, that is the ultimate statement of this is a state that is voting. Personality doesn't matter. Campaign doesn't matter. Who's running Washington matters. If the Republicans win the state, that's why.
I think that's fair. And North Carolina was the only one of the 9 swing states that Governor Romney actually carried over President Obama in the end in 2012. So there's that. Steve, this is where the fun begins for professional pollsters, because here we are 9 days out, over 1 million people have voted early in these states. A state like Iowa will have maybe 35% of actual voters will have already voted by the time Election Day comes around. That's possible. The point is, here we go. The high number of undecideds really strikes me, because you still in some of these states have double-digit undecided. What are they waiting to hear? There have been debates, there have been ads going on for 2 years. What else do they need to learn? They tend to be more female than male. They tend to be a little bit younger, so the question is, will they turn out? I think the older young people will turn out, 25 to 32, older young.
I'm not even an older younger anymore.
No, listen, imagine being a pollster and every birthday you think you're in a new demographic. It's a terrible feeling. And then you've got everybody sort of stuck in the mid-40s. Maybe Joni Ernst at 49 now, but they've all been in the mid-40s for months, the entire time. The question is, it's not going to be Obamacare and the ACA. It's not going to be the president's disapproval ratings. It's not going to be jobs and the economy. That's all baked in the cake. It's actually not going to be the war on women stuff either. How you feel about that, and if that's important to you in one way or the other, already been assimilated. It's probably going to be some type of security feeling, whether it's national security, border security, this feeling that we don't have control, we need leadership. But I'm fascinated to see it. I think in some of these races, education will be determinative. I've been an advocate for Republicans to go on offense on education, charter school choice against Common Core. And I think even if Cory Gardner ends up losing the female vote, as most Republicans do, he's been able to neutralize this war on women in a way where he earned the Denver Post endorsement. It's really an incredible turn of events. I think the war on women has run its course in 2014. You have these female senators in the South who won't dare touch it. Allison Lundgren-Grimes, Michelle Nunn, Kay Hagan, Mary Landrieu. They're hardly talking.
Well, but Colorado
is coal, not contraception.
But Colorado, it seems to me, is the test of it this year, because that's where the Democrats, it worked so well for them in 2010 in that Senate race, in 2012 with President Obama, and they have really used that strategy in Colorado. And like we say, a week ago we were talking on the show and saying, where's the gender gap in Colorado? This poll is telling us maybe it's starting to emerge late, so that's the thing to keep. Like
the numbers would be a lot. I'm sorry, Steve, but don't you feel like the numbers would be a lot better for Republicans if they didn't have some sort of remaining policy problems of their own? I mean, this is an election where incumbents are really not. And nobody wants an incumbent. Nobody wants these people back. Send them home. Don't come back to Washington. We don't want them back in Washington. Nobody wants them back. But yet these elections are so close. Doesn't that sort of indicate that the Republicans still have a lot of issue problems that they have to deal with? Isn't that where they're having problems?
No, I think that they've been vastly outspent. All the articles show that without the outside money, there's been an advantage. And I still think that incumbents have, look, people love to say, I'm for change and revolution and new things, and they come to Times Square and they see Aladdin and Cinderella because they know how the story ends, and they eat at Olive Garden, Applebee's, and Cold Creamery. So these same people vote. They love to say I'm for change. They're afraid to effectuate it, particularly when the world is on fire.
We got Olive Garden, we got Cold Creamery, we got Aladdin.
People are always serious about making change, but I do think Republicans have they do still have an advantage of taking the Senate. I think the big story on election night is going to be how many governors lose, because governors usually don't lose.
Yes,
and that has not been covered.
Eight is the number we put up yesterday. Will 8 or more lose, it would set a record. Anyway, thanks to our panel, Evan McMorris-Santoro, Basil Smikle Jr., Kellyanne Conway. Appreciate it today. Do polls like this really matter when millions of Americans, we just talked about this, hinted at this, millions of Americans have already actually voted in this election? What's the point of a campaign home stretch when half the electorate's already voted? A look at that issue, early voting.